I don't normally get annoyed by comments, but this one stuck with me, and I have some things to say. Hello, book friends. It's Alyssa. Welcome back to the channel, and hello if you are new. I usually don't care what people say in my comments, negative things, critiques, that kind of stuff. All opinions, unless they are actually hateful, are, valid here. But this one really ground my gears to the point where I took out a notebook when I read it and I just started writing a response. And it has been a while since I received this. I've had some time to reflect and I have put together a response of my own. I'm going to share the comment with you all, but I'm not going to show you who it is. I mean, I'm sure you can figure out who it is eventually if people decide to dig, but this is really not so much at the person themselves, but at the ideas they're expressing, because there's lots of people I feel like who feel like this, and it bugs me. You've got an idea of what we're going to talk about just from the thumbnail and the title of this video. But today we're going to talk about what it means to really read a book. I've subtitled this, or the time Alyssa got annoyed by a comment hating on audiobooks. If you see me looking down, it's because I literally have like a script for this, because I really wanted to get this right. I didn't want to just rant. So let's start with the comment that set me off. I will never understand the fast forwarding of audiobooks, especially doing it with a classic novel. It feels like someone splattering dirt all over the Mona Lisa, or simply just walking past it. I mean, why even consider or own the book? I'm sorry, but I could not take it seriously. At this point, you can't even add it to your read list because you missed so much of it. There is zero chance that you appreciated the text. No wonder you don't grasp his books. If you tried, maybe your experience with Dickens's books would be different. Just a tip: sit down, read the damn book, and try to take it in yourself. If you still don't like it, then read modern romance or something. It's kind of snarky. I don't really appreciate it, but it got me thinking about something very important about reading. Okay, so let me launch into my diatribe. Come with me, and we'll see where we end up when we get to the end of this. All right. So, basically, in case you are new to the internet, I'll let you in on a secret. This can be a very judgmental place. As creators, we get comments telling us we didn't understand the books because we're dumb, or saying that we can't possibly read X many books in a month, so we must be faking it. I assure you, I do not fake my reading. I have no life, and that's how I can read as much as I do. However, my favorite comments are those that essentially say what this commenter said: you can't possibly consider audiobooks reading, especially if you speed them up or fast forward them, which is just inaccurate. But anyway, we will ignore how ableist these comments are for now. That could be a discussion for another day. This most recent audiobooks aren't reading comment got my feathers ruffled and has me fixating on this idea of what it really means to read a book. Do you have to read, digest, and appreciate in a certain way to consider a book read? Do you have to closely read and annotate every book? And if you don't, does that mean you didn't really read it? And the biggie: do audiobooks count as reading? Spoiler, they do. We could end the video right here, but we're not going to. We're going to keep going. Why do we feel the need to criticize how other people consume books? Surely reading is a personal act, which we each approach in our own way. Maybe you can listen to music, or perhaps you need silence to read. Or maybe you need to use your bookmark or a finger as a guide for your eyes as you skim across the page. Perhaps you need to immersively read by listening to the audiobook while reading along with the text. A personal favorite of mine, actually, when the audiobook is really well done. Is one of these more valid than the other? I don't think so, but maybe you disagree with me. But hopefully I can at least have you open your mind to thinking a little differently if you do disagree. First, let's talk about how I actually read books, how I really read a book. The question I probably get asked the most is actually, how do I read as much as I do? And the short answer is something we've already covered: I don't have a life. I also don't watch TV or anything. But there's a much longer answer. First, I make reading a priority. I read at least 30 minutes every day. I started this habit about 5 years ago, and I've stuck with it. It pretty quickly became something where I found I was spending more than that time reading each day, and then I didn't want to stop reading. So 30 minutes became an hour to 2 hours, and suddenly I was reading a heck of a lot more books. And it doesn't feel like a chore or something that's daunting in any way. Because for me, finding 30 minutes to read is something that's easy for me to do. I'm not saying that it's like that for everybody, but for me, I can always find 30 minutes. And the best part is that I don't have to stop at that 30. If I have more time, I can keep reading. And suddenly, you're finishing books. Second thing is I read between different formats, including audiobooks. I'm not the first person to have their reading habit changed by audiobooks. I know some people really hate them, but I happen to love them. A good audiobook can make a story come alive in new ways. And there's an added bonus: I can take the stories on the go. When I was commuting an hour each way to work, my drives flew by when I had a really good audiobook to listen to. And I can get through more books, which is not really the goal, but suddenly you realize you're reading more when you can switch between physical and audio and other formats so that you can take your stories with you. I don't have to take myself out of story when I'm really enjoying it because I have to jump in the car and drive to work. I can actually continue and listen to it. I started a reading journal. This is something that might not be obvious, but as something that will help me read, but it's somewhere where I document my thoughts on what I'm reading, and it helps me remember the books I read. It's also a private space where I can reflect on all the thoughts that pop up in my own head in while I'm reading. A lot of them are personal things that books bring up because reading is a very personal experience. But it's also especially useful when I'm reading a particularly difficult book. I can spend time working through what I read and collecting all my thoughts and the questions I had. For example, I spent a long time working through all my feelings and thoughts and frustrations reading Lispector's The Besieged City. And then I read articles and watched reviews and integrated that with my own brain dump that I had written in my book journal. And it really helped me get a better grasp of what I had been reading and identify the things that were frustrating for me, and articulate that to myself. And I really enjoy this process. It really helps me keep reading because reading becomes a very interactive and reflective process for me. And it's a private space that I don't have to share with any of you, but it adds so much to my reading experience. And finally, I talk about books with friends on Substack, here on YouTube, to the dogs. Uh, I take what is typically a personal experience and I make it communal. And this creates another layer of understanding and connection with my reading. It makes me want to read more. Every layer that I add into this experience makes reading more of a part of my life, and therefore I do it more. And that's the beautiful thing about books, is they can be that really personal experience, but they can also be a really communal one. If you ask me, I think I'm really reading. But if I'm to believe the audiobook haters out there, I stop reading as soon as I hit the play button. Clearly, I think this is a bullshit take, but let's look a little bit into the history of silent reading. This is going to be really quick and dirty history of silent reading. I've left a lot of links in the description box of different articles, videos, podcasts that talk about this. There's tons of books that talk about the history of reading, and you could really spend a lot of time here, but this is a quick and dirty. Before we had written language, we told each other stories out loud, and then we wrote them down, and then we wrote down those stories, and still we shared those stories aloud to each other. Before we were all silently reading in our heads, reading was a communal act. You could say silent reading is actually reading 2.0. Thousands of years after writing was invented, very few people were literate. By necessity, reading was a communal social activity. Those able to decipher the markings, first on stone, then scroll, would read aloud to the group. From 500 BC to the Middle Ages, writers assumed that text would be heard. rather than simply seen. Words were written as one continuous string of text without spaces or punctuation. The first mention of silent reading comes from St. Augustine's Confessions, written between 397 and 400, where he's describing the reading habits of St. Ambrose. But when Ambrose used to read, his eyes were drawn through the pages, while his heart searched for its meaning. However, his voice and tongue were quiet. Often, when we were present, for anyone could approach him, and it was not his habit that visitors be announced to him, we saw him reading in this fashion, silently and never otherwise. Until this mention of Ambrose's strange habits, silent reading doesn't seem to appear to have been something people did, or at least it wasn't something that people felt the need to write about. Of course, there's debate over whether uh, Augustine is actually shocked that Ambrose is reading to himself, or if he's just kind of shocked that he's being so rude about not reading to everybody. But regardless of the fact, it seems to be the first, this is often credited as the first mention of silent reading. We could have been doing this for ages, like I said, but no one bothered to write about it. Up until the 17th century, social reading was the norm. According to historian Robert Darnton, for the common people in early modern Europe, reading was a social activity. It took place in workshops, barns, taverns. It was also always oral, but not necessarily edifying. In fact, silent reading was a bit of a subversive act. It made reading more personal and introspective. Silent reading allows each reader to have their own individual experience, but it also means they can keep what they're reading to themselves. Silent reading allowed people to engage with written texts on their own terms without the influence of an oral interpretation. This private act alarmed some. Silent reading by the late 19th century was so popular that people were worried that women in particular, reading alone in bed, were prone to sexy, dangerous thoughts. When I read that quote from one of the articles I have in the description, I immediately thought about Catherine Morland and Isabella Thorpe reading The Mysteries of Udolpho to each other in Northanger Abbey. According to librarian Paul Sanger in his 1997 book, Spaces Between Words, psychologically, silent reading emboldened the reader because it placed the source of his curiosity completely under personal control. In the still largely oral world of the ninth century, if one's intellectual speculations were heretical, they were subject to peer correction and control at every moment, from their formulation and publication to their oral reception by the reader. As Sanger writes, asocial reading helped facilitate intellectual rigor, introspection, criticism of the government and religion, even irony and cynicism that would have been awkward to read aloud. While silent reading may have replaced the more communal social type of reading humans had been engaging with for generations, it isn't necessarily a better way to read. According to the BBC, researchers have found that people consistently remember words and text better if they read them aloud than if they read them to themselves silently. When reading aloud, the brain is forced to process the text in a different way, as it is processing both the visual and auditory information, which can help to improve understanding and retention. So our brains are built for both ways of consuming a story. Neither is superior to the other. How you consume books should be a matter of choice. If your brain prefers audiobooks and you need to turn up the playback speed to a comfortable pace, do it. It doesn't mean you're fast forwarding through a book. We're all different. Just as some of us can speed read or simply read faster than others, some of us have quicker auditory processing and need to increase the playback speed so the book doesn't feel like it's being read in slow motion. However you consume a book, if at the end of the day you didn't like it, it should not be a reflection on the fact that you didn't really read it. I'm not going to suddenly find Dickens's writing less tedious because I spent time reading it simply with my eyeballs. I've read enough Dickens to know it's not the style of writing that I enjoy. So read or listen at the pace that suits you. And frankly, anyone who tells you you're not really reading the right way can stuff it.